Hi folks, and welcome back to part 3 of the From Box to Base ceiling mini series. In front of you can see the finished unit all painted and ready for basing, and before we move on to the basing, there's one bit I did actually forget to mention when painting your figures, because myself, I'm using them for wargaming, so I'm going to be touching them, moving them around the wargaming table, so you need to protect your investment after spending all that time painting your wargame figures. So what I basically do for mine is I use a matte varnish. It helps blend the colours together on the figure, and it also helps to protect them, and as the name says on the tin, a matte varnish, it gives the figure a nice matte realistic look. The matte varnish that I use is the War Paint Anti-Shine. This is painted on with a brush rather than sprayed on. I never use spray varnishes, I just don't get on with them. I've had a couple of disasters with them. It's the same thing as when you're trying to spray undercoats. The weather has got to be perfect, and if it's not, then you can get all kinds of problems with bubbling, weird dust effects all over your figures. So I basically always use a paintbrush to put on my matte varnish. Well, let's have a look now at the process that I use for producing one of my large bases. And I start off with using this. This is a plastic composite board. It actually started life out as a sign, but I cut them into sort of small sizes. The sizes I use for my large bases is 15 centimeters by 8 centimeters. Just gives plenty of room, so you can add a little bit of detail on the base. That's the stuff I use, and we'll go through the list of the stuff that I use to make my bases. I use a very light sand grit, and I usually mix it together with other grits to get a very, very different coarse medium, and this is what I apply to the base as the base coat. The best place to buy stuff like this, or the best source I've ever found to buy stuff like this, is always pet shops. Preferably ones that do aquarium stuff, or things for lizards and things like that. You'll find all kinds of size of grits and sands. They do have really unusual coloured ones as well, but I tend to always go for the natural colour, because I don't tend to paint the sands and grits that I put onto my base. I just leave them a natural colour. Some people like to paint their bases after they've finished. Other people like to use things like plaster, polyfiller, I think we call it in this country, that sort of thing as well. But I've always gone for the sands and grits to put onto my bases. It's just a personal preference, and I just like the look of it. The next stage, once I've done that, is the all-important static grass. This is a mixture of 3 different colours. I never go for one colour, I just mix a few colours in together. Sometimes slightly lighter, sometimes slightly darker, but it just adds a little bit of a more of a natural look. I've added the odd little white stone as well in there, just to break up the green, just to make it look a little bit more natural. And of course, to finish off, I have a pot of larger stones. These are actually granite stones, once again bought from a pet shop, just to add a little bit more difference in size and a difference in colours. You can see the different colours of granite, greens and the greys and the reds. And to finish off, the all important tufts. These guys, you can buy them pretty cheap. These comes in a sheet of 100, I think. You just stick them randomly. You try and get them, if you can, as close to the green that you are using for your static grass. The reason I do that is because grass is all different colours. Not many battles are fought on pristine lawns and sports fields. The grass is all different heights, so it just adds a little bit more realism to the base. So the first process is taking your whiteboard and giving it a good coat of a base colour. For this I use an acrylic, and I always go for the cheap stuff you can buy from art shops or art stores, and I think these ones comes from the Works, which is a company in the UK. I'm sure there's many in the Europe and America. I think this comes in at about £1 a bottle, so yeah, I've got quite a few of them loitering on the shelves. So it's a good idea to get the same colour all the time. And I give it a couple of coats of that just to bring the board up to a sort of, it's a bit shiny, but that will soon disappear under the dust and the stones. And you'll also notice that the figures themselves, the base is painted up in the same colour on the figure, if it'll focus. That just makes it easier, everything to blend in when you start sticking them down. I do actually tend to use good old Yoo-hoo. It sticks them fast, and with all the other layers of the stuff, they're not coming off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick these guys down and show you the start off, and I'll come back to you when I've done that. And there you have the figures mounted on the base, and didn't go for the two guys firing the muskets at the front, so I just went for the casualty figure at the front. Painted him slightly differently, painted him up as a Italian or a Saxon troop. So the next stage is to put the grit onto the base, and for that I use the good old favourite PVA glue. Don't water this down, you want to stick it on quite thick and gloopy, and the easiest way I found is to literally paint it on. It helps to get in between all the little areas between the shoes and things like that, so you can stick the glue into the grit quite easily. You want to put it on quite thick as well, because that way it holds onto all the grit once everything's all dried. So I'm going to go and do that, and we'll come back after I've done that. And there you have it. That's the first layer of the grit stuck down with the PVA glue. You've got to leave that now for a good sort of 24 hours for the PVA to set, and once that's done, we'll come back and we'll put some static grass on the base. And now with the grit firmly attached with the PVA, it's been drying for about 24 hours. It's now time to apply the static grass, and once again going to be using the good old PVA glue. Don't water it down again, because you want it nice and thick. You want it to static grass to stick to it really firmly. Again, use a paintbrush so you can get in between the feet. You want to pick out areas rather than covering the whole base in grass. Just helps make the base look that little bit more realistic. So I'm going to stick the static grass down, and I'm going to be back in a second to show you the finished result. And there we have the static grass, and nicely stuck down with the PVA glue. So now we want to finish things off with our stones and our tufts. And I know the tufts are generally self-adhesive, but the glue for the tufts isn't that fantastic, so I usually help that along with putting some Yoo-hoo glue in certain areas and attaching the stones and the tufts to that. So I'm just going to go and do that, and I'll show you the finished results. And there you have the finished article. Turn. Everything's all nicely glued together. You just got to leave everything to dry, and that's the finished article. That's one of my large bases. I hope you've enjoyed the little mini series of from box to base, and as always, thanks for taking the time for watching my video. Any questions, leave them in the comments and I will get back to you. And I must admit I've really enjoyed doing this, so I might do another one. I might just do an individual figure and show the process of painting a little bit more closely. So yeah, fantastic. Thanks for watching, and as always, bye for now.